Welcome to Paris Paranormal. We're so glad that you're here with us, and we've got a great show planned for you tonight. I'm Terry Keel.
And I'm April Wilson.
She is. And we've got a special guest tonight. His name is Steve Causey, and he has written a book about the LBL Massacre. We've got a copy here. You can order them online. We'll tell you all about that. And we're going to be talking to him here. So glad you tuned in, and this should be very interesting. So welcome, and take it away. What are you thinking?
I'm so excited. I'm just beside myself because how I found out about Steve was through one of my clients at Bumpus Mills. And the first time I ever went to Bumpus Mills, I remember thinking, I just know a Sasquatch is going to just step out in front of my car.
Wouldn't that be great?
Because it just looks like the perfect environment.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Had no idea that a year down the road, and I would stop in the little Bumpus Mills Cafe, which has like the best food ever.
So welcome to the show.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
It's
Glad
official.
To be here.
Yeah, and we're excited about all the information that you're going to bring to us about this and other escapades that you've had. And I know a lot of your friends are really heavy into this too, and out there in the bush looking to see what they can find. We went out just last week, actually, and boy, we had an amazing time, and we found this place, the LBL Massacre site. And you could tell. Oh, here we've got a little clip.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting ready to go out and meet the big wolf man himself. We're going to be looking for the dog man. It's his cousin.
You didn't wear musk perfume.
No, I don't have any perfume
Because
on.
they say the
But I
musk
do smell
perfume.
pretty good, though. You know, I got lipstick on.
I smell good.
You never know what somebody's going to say.
Here
out
we
there.
go. Okay, we'll be serious now.
Yeah, this is great. And there you were, tagging along.
I know, and I was carrying so much stuff in my backpack. I was prepared for
This was awesome.
whatever.
It was cold. What do you think, Steve? Have you been
to
there?
this place?
I have, and this particular area here is where the massacre is supposed to have occurred. Now, there's some debate as to exactly where in this particular area that it did occur. Some people believe it occurred closer to the lake, and some people believed it occurred closer to the cemetery.
Yeah.
And my personal belief is that if you were the first person coming to a campsite and you wanted to get the best spot, you would go closer to the lake.
Yes.
You would.
And Hellbent Holler, which is a research team that I'm very much acquainted with, believes it was closer to the lake as well. As a matter of fact, they were out there this Halloween night.
Everybody was there
There were a lot of people
yesterday.
out there. Mm-hmm. And
They froze.
it was very cold.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
27 degrees out there. Ooh.
Yeah. But this story is actually in a lot of other books that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I first heard this story on a fishing trip, which I took many years ago. It was actually 1998. And I had a gentleman, we used to fish together, and then there was a couple of other people I fished with. The gentleman that came along with him, I was not acquainted with him at that time. And he began, as we got in, the fishing was a little slow, he began to tell me, he asked me if I'd heard about the massacre, and I said, no, I haven't really. And he started talking about what had happened up in the Upper Peninsula. And to be honest with you, I did not believe him when I first heard this. I did not tell that to his face because it was so interesting that I wanted to hear the rest of the story. But I was skeptical. I've always been a little skeptical about things like this. But after I retired, which was a couple years ago, I began to research it a little more. And I tried to talk to as many people as I possibly could. I got in contact with several different paranormal research teams, including Hellbent Holler, Martin Groves, who's written a book on his experience there, and other people. And I began to realize that the story that I heard may very well have been true, because there were a lot of facts in it that seemed to line up with this story. Now, there's debate as to whether there were two of these events or one of them. Some people say there were actually two of these events where a family was attacked. One of them supposedly was in a towed camper, which I think this event here more closely resembles. The other is it was a camper that was self-propelled, and they were pulling a Chevette behind it. That is a story that came out literally about a year and a half ago.
I
So
haven't heard that one.
it kind of confused me a little bit, and that's called Roger's account. And I talked to the good folks over at the
Hate it when that happens.
yeah.
Yep, it happens.
It happens, but I talked to the good folks over at Cryptid. Let me see.
Yeah, the Cryptid
Cryptid
Studies.
Studies.
Cryptid Studies Institute.
Is that
yeah.
Elijah?
Elijah Henderson.
Yes.
Via text and email, and got more information. And then I spoke to him in person. And I apologize for my little lapse. I'm not
okay.
used to being
It's
on
okay.
camera.
It's fine.
I'm used to being behind the camera. So at any rate, I talked to them a little bit about it, and they allowed me to use his story in here, which he came out with that about a year and a half ago, and he was supposedly a survivor.
The
of
witness.
This. Yeah, the witness.
Yes.
There are some people that do not believe necessarily what he is telling is the truth. I just put it in my book and let the reader decide, because I don't know whether he's telling the truth or not.
It's a
and
good
I think
idea.
that's the way they brought it up, you know.
How can you just make that up?
It would be hard, in my opinion, to make up something like this.
Right.
And,
So bizarre.
It's bizarre.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just,
And the truth is always stranger than fiction.
Right.
Always.
Exactly.
so
And the interesting thing about this story is, and like I say, this has been in several books, even before my book, but what I did is I made this the centerpiece of my book and surrounded it with stories
Yes.
that I'm familiar with and everything. But the story I had heard is that this family of campers came in. There were 4 of them. There was, of course, a mom and a dad. There was a child that was believed to be about 14 years old, a male child. He was the eldest child. And then there was a young girl that was about 9 years old. And they were setting up the camper, basically getting it ready to go. And they were one of the first campers on site because they wanted to get a premium spot. This was early April. Most people put the date as April 7th. And also Roger puts that date as April 7th. But I do know that the park closed in early April, and the way I know that is I used to run a bait shop at the Dover end of the park, which is called the Trace. You guys
right,
traveled it
right.
the other day. That's
Been
the
there.
road
Yes.
that goes all the
Great.
way up the the Trace through into Kentucky. And it was called LBL Craft and Fishing Supplies. I sold bait there. I sold a few fishing supplies. I sold rod and reels and other things. And in early April of 1982, and since this was 40 years ago, I cannot give you the exact day
Right,
because I was not there to mark it
Right.
on a calendar.
Sure.
I didn't know anything about it. I had several fishermen turn around and come back and stop by my shop and say, "Do you know why the park is closed?" And of course, the first one that came by said, "I didn't know the park was closed, because the park is open year round." And I thought, well, that's strange. And so sure enough, a few minutes later, another one came by and said, "Do you know why they closed the park? We were going to go fishing. They had their boat in tow behind them." I said, "I just heard it myself. I don't know." So that kind of leads me to believe that the story I heard much later was actually based on a true event, because they rarely close the park.
And they closed it from the north end to the south
all
end?
the way to the, they closed both ends of it. And
wow.
I'm sure.
That's very serious.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure if anybody was in the park at the time, they probably let them out, but they would not let new vehicles into the park.
Do you remember the year? Was it 1982?
Yes, 1982.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
You had said the 80s, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It was 1982 and it was in early April, but I cannot put a date to the exact time because
Well,
that
that's
was
awful close.
Yeah, that's very close because it was the
Close
beginning
enough.
of spring, and that's usually when the
Yes.
business that I was running picked up because you had a lot of fishermen go in, and it was, it was a prime time for the early campers to come in as well. The other thing that leads me to believe that the story that I wrote is true and is based on memory. I guess the good Lord blessed me with a good long-term memory, but my short-term memory here lately is
That's a
not
good
that
thing.
great, you know.
It
But
happens.
when I was talking to a retired law enforcement officer, one of the things that was mentioned to me is that there were 6 coroners on this site,
Wow.
which is unusual.
That is very unusual.
6 coroners.
6 coroners.
And that, the only reason they could have all been there is because something very bizarre had happened and they all wanted to see that,
It
be a
did.
part of it.
And they couldn't understand
What
what it
had
was
happened.
that had attacked this
Right.
family. And this family was literally pretty close to mutilated. The arms, the father had fought this creature, and his arms were kind of laying beside him, all
Can you
torn
just,
up.
we can't even fathom or imagine the brutality of this.
Exactly, yeah. And it's really a pitiful story when you get down to it, to think
I mean,
that a family was slaughtered up there in the Upper Peninsula.
Yes.
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 And
Do you know if there was any, had it been reported, of course you weren't there, had you read that it had been reported
no.
anywhere that there was any defensive wounds, like they were trying to defend themselves, or was this
Yes.
a onslaught attack?
it was told to me that the father's hands had dark fur in his
Yes.
hand.
Oh,
And they
wow.
later analyzed this fur, and it came back an unknown hominid.
yes.
Ooh.
And literally in his death grips, what I was told was
I read that in your book.
he had this fur. And so obviously he was
He was struggling,
trying
fighting with
to
something.
fight
Protect
this
his
thing.
family.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the
Oh, dear.
interesting thing is all the witnesses that I have talked to indicate that the claws on these creatures are about 2 to 3 inches long.
Right.
And
That's what we've read.
black bear's claws are average 2 to 3 inches. A grizzly bear averages 3 to 4 inches. I did some research on that. I tried to research this as well as I could. But people know that something with 2 or 2.5 inch claws can do tremendous body.
my
If you look at
goodness.
bear attacks,
Oh, my
they
goodness,
do tremendous damage to the
Absolutely.
body. And but the interesting thing is, I heard there were 6 coroners. That's the key thing. Some of the key points that really caught my attention. One of these coroners was from Memphis, Tennessee. And I'd later talked to a retired law enforcement officer, and he said, well, Memphis, Tennessee is the area that designate the district that would cover this part of Kentucky and Lyon County. He said that would be the district coroner that they would call to a site that they really wanted to know what killed these people.
Yeah.
And so that kind of corroborates my story I heard
Yes.
also. Of course, there were local coroners from Kentucky. There were coroners, 6 coroners is a lot for a scene.
I've never
Most-
even heard
yeah.
of more than one.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the other part of the story is that I had heard is after the 6 coroners were there, it was sometime in the middle of the night, they ran all the local law enforcement out and told them to secure the perimeter around the park, turn people away, secure the perimeter. And he also said some form of military came onto the site.
Oh, I'm sure.
We don't know whether it was the 101st. Some people say it was the 101st, or it was a unit out of the 101st
Yeah.
Airborne, or some other group of
Sure.
military.
Sure.
And they went in with heavy armament. You know, these probably M60 machine guns, and whether I'm sure they had grenades. I'm sure they had the whole 9 yards. And the story that I was told is they had tracked this creature back to a dugout cave, and some of the DNR, which is Department of Natural Resources officers that went back into the scene, they were allowed to go back into the scene. And I had asked the question, well, why would they let them on if they'd initially kicked them out? They said it's to help identify what this thing was.
Sure, absolutely.
And they had no clue what it was. You know, what did this come from? Where did it come
Yeah.
from? And so they allowed them back on the scene, and they observed about 8 Army soldiers that were struggling to load this thing on the back of a deuce-and-a-half truck,
Yeah.
which was a standard military truck for years.
To
And
load what thing?
this creature that
So they
had
did
killed.
capture.
They did kill this
capture and
creature.
kill the creature.
Yeah,
They killed something.
they killed something.
Yeah.
And what they described is it had a wolf-like head, it had dog-like ears, and they described the smell of this creature as being something as the smell of death, is what they said. It stunk horribly.
Well, just the blood from having bludgeoned all those people would have started
They
to...
said it was matted.
Right.
And the other thing that's interesting is a lot of the law enforcement on the scene of this became sick.
Yeah.
Because inside this camper was described as a horrible smell. And some of them were throwing up. That's how bad it
I mean,
was.
I can't even imagine.
Right.
And I used to be an EMT with the rescue squad. I was volunteer for many years. And for police officers or
Yeah.
state troopers to be unsettled and to
Yes.
throw up at a wreck scene
Yeah.
is very unusual, because a lot of times there's blood and carnage at a wreck scene.
Oh, yeah.
And they're well trained. They do not usually have that kind of reaction. So a lot of people think it might have been the odor itself inside this camper was just so sickening. The other theory was, and this is well known theory that in other books as well as mine, that there was some kind of perfume with a heavy musk, as
Yeah.
you guys mentioned earlier.
That's why I asked you
Yeah.
if you
Oh,
had
right,
musk
right, yeah.
perfume on.
And that they thought this might have attracted this creature.
Oh, exactly, because
Yeah.
musk is a pheromone or...
Exactly. But this crime scene
give
was
me
so
some of that?
horrific that it literally shook a lot of people up. I mean, you can imagine what it would be like on a crime scene like this. The other thing that happened is, and one of the deputies, they found clothes for a little girl after the fact that they had gone into the camper, but there was no little girl around. And so they started looking and spread out, the rescue squads and everything spread out with law enforcement and were looking. And the way they found the little girl is a deputy stepped under this tree and there was blood dripping off of it
Okay,
and started
yeah.
hitting
So it was
his
up in
hat.
the tree.
It
The
was up
body
in the
was
tree.
in the tree.
He looked up, at about 30 feet was the body of a young girl that was partially eaten.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a pretty horrific story.
I mean,
It really is, and to
it's just-
think that they are that vicious, you know, is really a good reason for any of our listeners that are watching tonight to always be carrying, when you are out in those woods, with something significant. Not a pea shooter for sure, but especially a knife or something that you could defend yourself. And, you know, that's always wise anyway. I mean, I remember being out in the green swamp, many times we would see things that you definitely, if they would have attacked you, like the bobcats or these kinds of wild animals, we're in their domain.
We are.
And so we're coming in, you know, doing whatever we're doing and disturbing their area. and they're defending it. So, you have to look at it from their point of view, although I'm not, giving any credence to this creature. However, I did have a friend I was telling you with earlier who had lived in Texas and had gone out in his backyard. He was a smoker, and he went out to smoke in this backyard, and it kind of butted up to a cornfield and some other, areas around a farmland there. And he looked out and he saw these red eyes, but it looked like they were on a dog, and it was very high up. And he thought, what dog could be up that high? And as he kept looking at it, this thing was moving, and he was able to see that it had a human-ish type form and was standing on two legs. And he was so afraid. He had called my husband and myself and said, I am ready to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I am moving tonight. I am coming to Florida. We were in Florida. He was in Texas. He got in the car and drove away that night as soon as he felt that he was able to get away, because what he had seen had literally scared him to death. And he thought, had he stayed, this thing may have come in. So I do think that he saw some form of a dog man, some form of a creature, that had red eyes. And that's pretty much what you were sharing they looked like.
They do. And all the witnesses that I have and all the study I've done, this has been kind of something that has fascinated me, especially, having heard the story. And I'm not sure exactly where the story I heard originated from, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds like it might have been directly from law enforcement.
Well, I had
cannot
heard,
attest to that.
and I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard that a lot of the law enforcement, when they retired, that's when they started kind of releasing the stories.
It is.
Talking about it.
It is.
Yes.
And that's another factor that leads me to believe that there is truth to this story.
Yes.
Because, these law enforcement officers have to worry about their families, about their jobs.
Yes.
They were told literally not to say anything and to be quiet about this. And so, you have a family to raise. You don't want to ruin your career. That's
Right.
the last thing you
That's
want to
right.
do.
And they knew that
Right.
people would ridicule them and make fun of them. And they would have jeopardized their jobs.
Exactly, yeah.
Isn't that a shame that somebody is trying to relate to you something they've experienced, and people
But-
would ridicule them? I mean, how judgmental of humans. It's not
But
a good
we're in
thing.
a different time now.
Well, they're still pretty judgmental.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying
Understand,
back
yeah.
then, you didn't have internet, and you didn't have so many people that had come forth and
Not as
witnessed
many,
and had these.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's easier than ever.
It is, and I think more people are becoming open to the fact that
Yes.
creatures exist that we have not
Yes.
documented.
Oh, yes.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, my mother and father, which is in the first of my book and everything, I don't know whether you've heard of a hoop snake.
No.
Okay.
Never till I read your book.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, a gentleman you've had on the show, Dewey Edwards, has a story about a hoop snake too that he
We
told
love
me.
Dewey.
Dewey's a great guy. If it weren't for Dewey, I wouldn't have this book published because he is such a gracious guy. He came and helped me publish
I
it.
just think all the group that's into all of this, we're all just like,
Supportive
we're
of
just
each
very
other.
support. Everybody loves
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. It's a group. That
Very
is
unique.
very unique. You got Barton Nunley with Inhumanoids. You've got Martin Groves, which literally had to be talked into coming out with
Yes.
his story.
Right,
he did
right.
not want to come out with it.
They'll
and
have to
it's
come on this
understandable.
show.
Yeah.
And
You need to
isn't
get-
Barton retired?
Martin
Reach out
is
to us.
retired. Yeah.
He's retired.
Yeah.
Law
Law
enforcement.
enforcement
Yeah.
officer.
That's
yes.
what I thought.
And
Yes.
it'd be a great one to have on your show.
I've watched
Yes.
a lot of his
Reach
shows.
out to us.
Yes, Barton, if you're watching,
Shout
Mr.
out.
Barton, I've got to meet you too.
That's right.
But these people are all credible researchers. They're motivated and driven just like I am.
Yes.
I did not want to believe the story when I first heard it.
Exactly.
But
that's how that
since
goes.
then, There is DNA evidence of Bigfoot, and the thing about it is they have actually captured it, and so we know that
Who actually has that DNA?
the
government?
I'm sure the government has it. I'm
Steve
sure they do.
Carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's several research groups that have actually found it,
Yes.
and what they find, now this is not of the dog man, this is
Bigfoot. Uh-huh.
And what they describe is that something is very similar to humans. It's 99% human, and then there are 2 8 markers in it. I have read a lot on the DNA study. They have captured DNA study through what's called environmental DNA. It's called eDNA. And I would love to see some researchers become more interested in the land between the lakes and start getting environmental DNA samples.
Is this where
Yeah.
they get it from the water samples?
Exactly. They filter it through, and
Yes.
then they can tell what creatures have been around.
Right.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't matter if the creature has necessarily
Good
urinated in the
catch.
stream, if it's just been in the
Yes.
stream, if it
I've
walks
watched
through it.
I've watched some
Yeah.
documentaries on this.
Exactly. And so it's not a far stretch to assume that if you have, which a lot of people say that Bigfoot is kind of an early human.
I think he's a hybrid, actually.
hybrid, yeah.
I do truly believe he is some form of a hybrid. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
It's not a stretch to assume that if Bigfoot exists, then you've got some form of a dogman that exists.
Yes.
There
Or
are just-
Mothman. Right.
There are simply too many credible witnesses.
Right.
And
that
there's
have
Too
so
many
many-
things have
Too
been
many.
seen.
You know, they say there's so many different types of dogmen.
Yeah.
Some are, they say, looks like a bodybuilder, literally, tiny waist, dog head,
Yes.
and then some, they're a little different description.
And actually, Martin Groves in his book has the dogman types. There are some that people have described as witnesses that look more like a hyena in the face.
Yes,
There are some that look more like a German shepherd.
yes.
And there are some that are combinations in between. And the thing about this is you might want to assume that there's been some kind of genetic manipulation.
Right.
You can't help but wonder that.
However,
Well, yeah.
in the 1600s, when French settlers were moving into what would become Kentucky, it was not even named a state at that time. It was Kentucky, and they were moving through Tennessee and into that area. It is pretty well documented that the Shawnee Indians warned these French trappers
Right.
not to go in certain areas
Yes.
That's right.
up
That's
north
absolutely
around
right.
Kentucky, and the French translation for what they had translated from the Shawnee Indians was Lugaroo, which literally translates into wolf man.
Yes.
Which
uh-huh.
makes you wonder about Louisiana and the Rougarou.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And if you go all the way back to the pharaohs and things, remember there was a dog-faced inscription
Yes.
that they had. And now and this is just something that I've been looking at, the earth is very old. And many different types of generations of beings have lived here before us. So many things are covered by literally the sands of time. And archaeologists are digging all these things up only to find out all these mysteries on giants. And of course, we know they're there because of the Bible and the Nephilim. But, was there a dog-man type of existence prior even to the Nephilim? And is this some form of a hybrid? And is it some form of an animal that could possibly be an interdimensional being? And, this is one thing a lot of people say about Bigfoot, which I have seen. I know he's real. It doesn't matter what anybody else has to say on the planet. I know what I saw. And this thing is massive, huge, and definitely able to rip apart an entire family all by itself without any issue. Thank God it was pleasant when I saw
But I
it. It
don't
wasn't
think that
something.
they're nowhere near. on the scale of a dog man.
Well, who knows? I mean,
You
we
know?
don't really know. But one thing I will say is I've never heard of one ripping people
Yeah.
up. But the Yeti with the Russians way back, you know, and that they don't know what happened with that Russian group.
Yeah, that went camping.
And they thought that was maybe
That
a
was-
Yeti or something. But it could have been a lot of other things too. But again, the
That was in the
military was
Ural
involved.
Mountains.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the government was involved, and you know,
Tents
they
were ripped.
know more than what they've shared.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we don't really know what we're dealing with here. But you know what we can do is trust our gut. And when you're out there, and you know, like when I was out there with y'all, and we were walking around, you could definitely feel when you were feeling like the danger, you know.
Well, when the insects and everything
It
goes
gets quiet, and the
eerie
birds take off.
quiet.
And I have an interesting story on that too. I had the opportunity to meet a lifelong trapper, and this gentleman is not a weekend fisherman. He's not a occasional hunter. He's been trapping since he was 10 years old, and I actually met him within the last year and interviewed him. He was over in the land between the lakes. He was a little bit far south, more on the Barkley side, a little bit south of the, in an area that is not too far from what's called Nolan's Ridge. Mm-hmm. And he had been out there and he had been hunting that day. And he didn't carry his phone with him because phone service in the land between the lakes
Yes.
is
Sketchy.
very sketchy.
Oh yeah,
And
found that out.
he described seeing, and now keep in mind, this gentleman is been trapping since he's 10 years old. He's seen every kind of varmint, including bear and everything. But
And
he
how
saw.
old is he now?
This gentleman is about. I didn't ask him his age. I'm kind of the kind of person
Right,
that doesn't.
but,
But
yeah, he's
he's
been
an
doing
older
it.
gentleman. I think
Yeah.
he's in his late 50s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, my
And-
dad's been a trapper
Yeah.
his whole life.
And he's been trapping. And he told me he saw a print there that he could not explain. He said it was about 8 to 10 inches long. It had dog-like pads on it, and it had claws that extended out from the front of it. Now, a bear track is more rounded.
It's round,
It's
definitely
rounded.
round.
He said this
It's
was
a pad.
He said this was
Yeah.
some kind of canine. He said, I have never seen a track like that before. And I would take his word for it because this man has been a trapper since he
Oh,
was
yeah.
10 years old.
Yeah.
And I had a second person come to me because I've been trying to get as much information from local people as I could there.
Yeah, that's good.
And this second gentleman has done a lot of squirrel hunting down in the land between the lakes. Now, this gentleman's a little bit older, and I'm not mentioning names. I don't want
Right.
any
Sure.
ridicule, but I talked to him and I believe him.
Right.
I mean, because they one of them actually approached me because about my book. He had read that, and he said, you know, these people don't necessarily want to come forward until they see evidence or, you know,
Yes.
somebody think they're crazy.
Yes.
Right.
Not so much nowadays, as you mentioned, but he had seen the same kind of track a little bit further north, and he could not describe what the track was. He's been hunting most of his life. He said it was a canine. He said, but if it's a canine, it's the biggest track I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
You know, there might be a dog in this world that has a print that big, but it's got to be a massive,
Yeah.
you know, like a
Mastiff,
mastiff or
Like a
something.
mastiff
Yeah.
or something, yeah.
The first gentleman I talked about, he described another experience to your point, and I described this in my book. All the witnesses that have seen these things or been around them describe the woods going quiet. You don't hear normal bird song. You don't hear normal cricket sound. You don't hear the sounds of the woods.
Right.
And I've done hunting myself. I don't claim to be the most, I've killed quite a few squirrels and been deer hunting a few times, but I don't consider myself an expert. But when you go in the woods, you're going to be used to hearing those
Yes.
noises.
You are, yeah. They're
And
there.
They describe everything being quiet. And this same gentleman was launching a boat up in the Upper Peninsula, not too far from where the massacre occurred or purportedly occurred not too far from Demonbreun Bay. And he describes the feeling that he felt like he was in great danger and he was being watched.
Yes, trust your gut.
And everything was quiet. And he said literally he rushed to get his boat in the water and got it out and everything. And then a few minutes later, all the normal sounds came back. But he said, I can't describe it except to tell you that sometimes you know you're in great danger. And that was the feeling I had, and everything was quiet. So I
That's
trust
what
what
happened
he
to
told
my dad.
me. Yeah.
He was digging ginseng, and he said the hair just started standing up on his neck. He said I could hear like trees popping.
Yeah.
And he
Right.
said everything in me
hear
said,
that.
get out of here. And he said I took off, I got in my boat, and I headed across the river.
And that was probably a wise thing because
Yeah.
I've heard that same thing. And to your point, if you're in the woods and everything, I recommend, and I think I actually state this in my book, I recommend you carry some kind of weapon because
Absolutely.
let's say you're not even dealing with a cryptid or anything. You could have a rabid fox come up and,
Sure.
and
Sure.
you might have the chance to pick up a big stick.
Or a
But
snake.
it won't do you much good.
Yeah, but I'd rather have something that I could
Shoot
kill
it.
this rabbit fox,
Absolutely.
than a big stick. And,
Exactly.
Or take you a big can of hornet wasp spray. That's like mace.
Right, right.
Well, I wouldn't want to get that close.
But
It's like
there
30 feet.
was an incident here not too long ago that I had actually heard on the news of a gentleman that was attacked by a grizzly bear, and he emptied a whole can of bear spray on it. It didn't do any good. This
Yeah.
bear still killed him.
Oh,
So it's a hit or miss thing, and
is.
it literally
You don't want to miss.
you don't want to miss,
Yeah.
And
That's why I wouldn't go that route. I'd go with the gun.
but in the first of my book, I described the hoop snake. I'd like to talk about that again.
Yes.
If you don't
Yes.
mind.
Let's talk about that.
My grandfather died in 1956. I was born in 1957, so I never had the opportunity to meet him. But he had called my mother, yelling for her when they lived down at Lost Creek, which is the land between the lakes at that time, and told my mother to go get her mother, which was my grandmother, which unfortunately I never got to meet either. They both died before I was born.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
And so they came out, and he had killed a snake that had a thorn in the tail about 1.5 or 2 inches. And he had told her that the snake had grabbed this thorn in its mouth and started rolling toward him, like you would if you took a car on a rim or something and just pushed it and started rolling. This is what this thing did. And he said he didn't know what it was, but he had a hole in his hand. But he stepped behind a tree because it was getting close to him. It released that horn and hit a tree about 6 inches. And with that, and then while it had hit this tree and was still trying to come around at him, he killed it with a hoe.
Good.
And because he was out in his garden, fixing his garden up, and this was back in 1939. And my mother has described this story to me several times, and I know my mother, was a trustworthy person.
Sure,
if she
right,
told you
right.
something, you could
You
more or
could
less
take it to
take
the
it as the
bank.
truth.
Right.
And neighbors came around for literally miles to look at this snake. And scientists say the snake does not exist, but it had a horn in it. About 4 days later, the 6-inch tree died. Literally. It died. It started dying. Its leaves turned brown. Within 2 months, it was dead. And of course, the snake had struck that tree. And they threw it out. My grandfather threw it in the edge of the wood. Well, his dog ate part of the snake, and he died.
Oh, so it was very...
Whatever poison this thing had in
Poisonous,
it
yeah.
was pretty tremendous.
Yeah.
And there was a second story I describe in my book where my dad was out maneuvering in 1939. He joined the Army in 1939, so he had a jump on the people going into World War II because he used to muscle for a living, and you were lucky to make $1 a day.
Yeah.
Real
my
lucky.
goodness.
And him and another soldier were down in Jacksonville, very close to Jacksonville, Florida, out in the swampish area there. And they witnessed the same snake at a distance. And the way I describe it in my book is this snake was lining its hook up in the back of its tail. It had its tail up in the air with where they were. They would walk this way a little bit. It would follow them. They would walk this way a little bit. The gentleman or the soldier that was with my dad said, now, I've seen these snakes before, and what he intends to do, if you get any closer to him, he's going to grab his tail. He's lining up with where you are, and he's going to literally roll to you and attempt to hit you with his thorn.
Wow.
And so that's a second confirmation.
So does this thorn, it's part of the snake and it comes out, or?
Right. As what was described to me was, if you have like a normal snake with like a copperhead, its fangs are up in its cheeks.
But this one has it in the tail.
This has a tail extending out from right before its tail ends into a blunt tail.
That is fascinating.
And
I
apparently,
pretty much kill every snake I see unless it's a black one.
So instead of it like slithering, it rolls up almost like a tire.
it rolls like a tire, and it's very fast. You know, it
Yeah.
literally gets momentum.
And I think that would kind of shock you, wouldn't it? Just seeing that coming, you'd be like, what?
Any snake shocks me, but my goodness.
But I know my parents, and if they, witness this, they know it's true. Now, scientists
Sure.
will tell you
Yeah.
the snake never existed.
Oh,
Well, we know
never has
scientists don't know
existed.
Science is wrong often.
Yeah,
They don't know everything.
So now it may very well be extinct now.
Right.
It's possible that
Probably
it's
not.
extinct. Yeah.
Have you done some research to try to find it?
Actually, I have not
You haven't
gone
had time?
out and tried to. I've been to the Lost Creek a few times, to the old, what's called the old home place where my grandparents lived. As a
Yes.
matter of fact, I was out there about a week and a half ago. My cousin from Texas was down, and she wanted to see the site again where her grandparents had lived, because she's a direct cousin, first cousin of
I
mine.
can't wait for the leaves to fall so we can go and see things.
And we walked all around there, but the chances of seeing this or something are pretty slim. But I was in the area where this had happened and where he had killed the snake, which is commonly referred to as the hoop snake.
Hoop snake. Okay.
And the odd thing about it is there are reportings of this snake in Australia. But there's nothing documented on it. There are eyewitnesses accounts of a hoop snake in Australia. They describe it grabbing its tail, rolling, and releasing it when it wants to target.
Strike.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
interesting.
very interesting. Well, I'll be
so-
watching out for that.
Yeah.
Let's hope they're hibernating.
Yeah.
I don't like spiders and snakes.
Well,
I think they wrote a song about that.
I'd kind of like to say that I wish they're hibernating or extinct too, but I'd like something to
Yeah.
back up what my parents
Oh, yeah.
told me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are very few witnesses that describe this, but the credibility of my parents I know for a fact.
Oh, yeah.
And the people in Australia describe almost an identical snake. And of course, Australia's got every kind of poison snake you can
Yes.
imagine.
Boy, they
so-
really do. Australia is quite the place.
Yeah.
I'll
Yes.
stay right here, thank you. But,
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to kind of go back to the story about the dog man, because there isn't enough good information out there, really. We get little bits and pieces from things that happen, like, that camping site. I would really love, if anybody out there is listening to us, you're retired, and you know anything more about any of this, contact us here at hauntedparis@usa.com. We would so love to hear anything that you might have to add to some of these stories that Steve is sharing with us. And a dog man, maybe you've seen that snake, We would love to have some additional stories, and we'll get that information to Steve as well once you share it with us. But we sure would like for you to come on and share any of your possible dog man experiences, or if your family has also been a part of something or heard something.
And we know you're out there.
Oh, they're definitely out there. There is
They're definitely,
so much
because
out
I've
there.
joined too many groups. There's too many people from here to Waverly to Camden to everywhere that's having activity currently as we're sitting here.
Now, you know, we were talking pre-show also, and this is really interesting. You had shared something. I had said that what I many times have seen weird things, I start praying and rebuking it in the name of Jesus, and you know, that does work. But other people have done the same thing, and it has worked. So that's a whole different avenue that I would like to look at, because I look at a lot of things from the spiritual realm and the spiritual issues, and we have more power in that vein that we do in the natural. So, share what you
Absolutely.
have.
And this is, do you care if I hold Martin's book
No,
up?
not at all.
Yes.
Please do.
Martin Groves is a retired police officer, and
Read this book.
he shared this
Go to YouTube.
story directly with me. And Martin is such a great guy. He's one of the kindest guys you've ever met. But what he described to
Here,
me,
I can put that right out
Sure.
here for people to
We can put them both out
Yeah,
here.
sure.
what he described to me, and he describes in his book as well, which Martin and I have become very good friends, and he described being so frightened that it literally, he started saying the Lord's Prayer,
Yes,
because this
absolutely.
is something that should not exist.
Right, exactly.
It should not exist. We've been
Right.
told since we were kids that things like this don't exist.
Right. There are no boogeyman.
There are no boogeyman.
monsters, but you know, that's not really the whole truth.
And one of the things he describes in his book is when this happened, he suddenly came back. He was literally in shock.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, his deputy partner, and he describes it in his book too, actually had a stroke during this event, and he
That
was,
wouldn't surprise me.
and it was so frightening to him.
Oh, I'm
And,
sure.
I mean, I
But
can't
he
imagine.
had told me, and he did not put this in his book, and Martin, I hope you're not minding me telling this, but at any rate, he told it to me. He said he had almost the feeling of a telepathy coming from this thing. that said,
Absolutely.
I'm going
Yes.
to kill you,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
there's nothing you can do
Yes.
about it.
Oh, that's
and
not
he
true.
described that to me. And so I think these things kind of play mind games with you because, okay, if I walk into the next room and I see one of these things, how much fright is that going to put in me? Or if I'm in the woods, I'm just using that as an example, you're not expecting to see something like this.
No.
And they should not exist, but
But that says there's some intelligence.
exactly. These creatures are described. There's a well-known story, and I have it in my book too, where a group of Murray State students
Yes.
came down to the area on a weekend to relax in a campfire up in the Upper Peninsula, and they were surrounded by these things, and the glowing eyes is what they described.
Yes.
They heard growls. At first, they didn't pay much attention, but after a point, they all realized something was in the woods.
Yes.
And they literally, this thing chased them out of the woods and grabbed hold. It was in a VW microbus, grabbed hold of the back of the motor compartment and left
Yes.
claw marks.
I've heard that story many a times.
Yes, and that's a well-known one.
That's a very frightening story, and
Yes.
thank God they got out. But you know, I really love talking about that spiritual implication because these things are powerful. They do have a power. I do believe they do speak to us through mental telepathy. Many different realms speak through mental telepathy.
Exactly.
And that doesn't necessarily mean, however, that that's a more intelligent race or a more intelligent being. It just means that's how they can
Different
speak in
frequency.
our language, and it's just something that they may have available to them. But if anybody else out there, oh my gosh, this is such a great area that I've looked into many times, and I'm very passionate about the spiritual implications. If any of you have any stories like that, please reach out to us again at hauntedparis@usa.com, because boy, we would love to hear those stories as well. And we're always looking for people to have on.
Yes, and if you do not know this by now, I'm just going to let you know that we are in the Mecca of everything. Land Between the Lakes
We are.
is truly the next Area 51. Could I say that?
It's like an Area 51. It's
becoming
yeah.
as popular.
I believe over the last few years. Now, when this story first came out, and obviously I heard it, many years ago, but there was a lot of people I think were skeptical like I was, but it seems like just in the last 4 to 5 years, the story has become more popular and more talked about, and the area, there are more researchers in this area.
There's so many people that go missing. When
Right.
we went on our little expedition, there's clothes everywhere. Just a random shoe, a random purse, a random,
There was a bra hanging from a tree.
and
Oh
it'd
my
been there
goodness.
quite a while.
Yeah.
Terry wanted it. I told her she couldn't have it.
No, not true.
But it was just, there's just the weirdest stuff.
I'm going to get you back.
And the thing about this is there are more. This is not just isolated to the Land Between the Lakes. There's
Right.
stories of course, the Bray Road Beast,
Yes.
which is well documented.
Linda
which is-
Godfrey brought that one.
Exactly, which is described identically
Oh,
as the
yeah.
same creature. There are stories down in Louisiana. There is an island down there that local fishermen have to go when they're going out to run their shrimp nets and everything too. And they warn people that are not
Honey
familiar
Island.
with it. It's not Honey Island, but it's close in that general area. And they warn people, this is because of Dogman, they say, do not go there, especially at night.
Yeah.
Because witnesses have described seeing these dog-like creatures. Apparently they bed down there at night.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And many, many stories of these things all through the United States. So I don't think it's confined to the Land Between the Lakes.
Yeah.
There are some people that will tell you, we're all crazy. There aren't any
Right,
down
right,
in
sure.
the Land Between the Lakes.
Yeah.
But I have talked to too many credible people.
Yes,
Oh, yes.
way too
Credible
many
witnesses.
credible people.
Too many people that have had too traumatic of an experience. You can't make that stuff up.
No, not when they're speaking out of pure fear and they know they're going to be judged, but
And the
they're still
details.
willing to share their truth and what happened to them, And a lot of them are police officers or
Oh.
EMT people or
Military.
retired military.
Preachers.
Exactly. So it's coming from all walks of life,
Oh, yeah.
and there are so many different avenues to look at here, so many different things. Well, I know we're getting to the top of our hour, and I just want you to share with our listeners today, how could they reach out to you? Where can they find you, Steve?
Well, I can give my email address, and I would love to hear from anybody. If you've got a story or you have had an experience in the Land Between the Lakes, I'd love for you to email me. It's at my name, and it's a real simple email. This one is real easy to remember. It's Steve Causey, Causey, at AOL.com.
There you go.
So it's
Couldn't get
easy.
easier than
Yeah,
that.
it doesn't
That's
get a lot
pretty
easier
easy.
than that.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear any personal accounts of
Oh,
anybody. I love to research
Yes.
this subject, and it's every day I talk to more people who give me stories that otherwise would not give the story. A lot of people are a little afraid to come forward because they might be ridiculed, and I can tell you it doesn't matter what you tell me. If you told me that you and Bigfoot, went down the woods holding hands together, I still want to hear it.
Yes.
So
Yeah, but try to stick to the truth, okay?
to the truth would be nice. Yeah.
We'd like to hear the truth and
always a
and
good
take a
thing.
look at that, yeah. And where can we get the book again?
The LBL Massacre is available on Amazon.
Okay.
It's $18.95 for the hard copy. If you are a member of Kindle, it doesn't cost you any money. It's free. It's zero.
Nice.
If you're not a member of Kindle, then it's $8.95. So you can get it either with hard copy or you can get it with download.
Okay, very good. And do you know, before we close, do you know anything much about the cemeteries out there?
Yes, there are a lot of cemeteries, and actually, if you go into Stewart County, Tennessee, they've got a book that's called The Cemetery, The Records of the Cemetery. It's at the Visitor Center.
Oh, I've seen that. I've gone through it.
Exactly,
We
and
need to
they
get that.
list all
and
of
here's,
these cemeteries.
here's us going
Yeah.
through a cemetery.
And
Yeah.
of course,
yeah.
that's Mount Union Cemetery. That's
Yes, it
right
is.
at the place.
You know-
That's
behind.
right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're exactly
We
right.
noticed a lot of those graves were really sunk down,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
sunk
they
in.
were absolutely, they're so old that they had all indentations. As you can see there, it's an indentation. And it was really, it's quite
I
lovely
love
there.
cemeteries, so that
But
was
one thing I will say is April said, I don't hear any crickets. We did not hear anything, and the birds were quite quiet, and we were just looking around at the ages of some of these. And many of them you couldn't even read. They were so old. I'm
Yes.
thinking from the 17 instead of the 1800s.
Yes, and a lot of these cemeteries, there was a black population that lived in the area of the Upper Peninsula for years. There may be some unmarked graves up there
Oh,
as well.
tons of
Yeah.
unmarked
Yeah.
graves, yes.
Yes.
And broken graves, unfortunately. People leave those graves alone. Those are resting places of folks.
That's
I
a
have
sacred
this same
place.
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had gotten a lot of the pictures. Now, is this going to be where people can hear the dogs?
This
Okay. Let's see. So we're still at this other cemetery here, and
I think
boy,
this is the cemetery where y'all were
Yeah.
loading up,
oh, this was pitch black out, and we couldn't see a
and
thing.
I
but
had
it
not
showed
gotten
up
in my
good.
vehicle. And remember, I could hear
Yes,
something howling,
yes, she could.
and I was like,
She jumped out of the car.
I was
Something's
like,
howling.
"Can y'all not hear that?" It was loud,
Yeah.
but I had read where people experienced that a lot there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes. Uh-huh.
A lot of
And
strange
actually,
howling.
Barton Nunley, which is a researcher, which I actually got to meet him at the Crypticon at the Wildman Convention. Mm-hmm. He has some good videos, and some of the videos, describe a little bit more about the massacre. And you can find some interesting audio on the internet as well from some of these sites that purportedly have captured these creatures on audio yelling.
Yes.
And it is one of the, I'll put it this way, the most ungodly sounds you've ever heard in
They
your
really
life.
are.
Yeah.
There's some very strange sounds. We have heard these before,
I
and
think
not like the coyotes, although we
Right.
do have a. Can we run that final film before we talk about? And you can see April had her high-powered torch out there.
And this really doesn't. I have a new one now. This really does not even
They
give
can
it
be here in 2 flash seconds. Be very careful.
what we've been able to.
Yeah, that's that fence right there.
Look, 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 look. Look, I
You
got eye
can
shine.
see, I kept getting eye shine.
Right here.
Yeah,
And it was like 5 feet off the
Had
ground,
it
the
in
same set of eyes.
See
And
it?
that right there was at the bison range.
They were actually very
See it?
close to us,
No.
and
See
they
it?
howled for a good 20 minutes. They
Oh,
just kept
wait, I think I
on
did
and
see it.
on
And then
and
they go
on.
dead silent.
Kevin, back
And
the
then they-
car up
It
and put
literally
your
went
lights
dead silent. You
Cranked up
literally
again,
could not
too.
hear a cricket
She's
or
got that
anything.
pretty bright flashlight.
There, say it.
Look at
been
that little
calling
hat
them
of
up.
mine.
I know, but
And now he's like, get away.
well, that's
How
because
corny
there's
can you
30 or
possibly
40 of
look?
them. They run in a huge path.
But yeah, you definitely. I kept seeing two eyes, like yellowish
And they were so high up in the tree.
And that's what people
and
describe.
big.
And how can those coyotes be that
Yeah,
high
it
in
wasn't
the tree?
a coyote.
Yeah.
There's no way.
We were hoping that the eye shine would show, but it didn't. But there was a lot of things going on, and you could see movement in the bush, but not with any clarity. It just looked like black movement. But you know, the other thing too is we're having Enigmacon in March of this year, and I'm sure we need to, next year. This is 2023 still.
Upcoming March.
So, yeah, March of 2024, the 8th through the 10th, and we're hoping you can make it out to that.
Certainly.
Bring your books, get a vendor
Yes.
table, and we'd love to have you come and share, and definitely with folks. So if
Yeah.
he can make it, he'll be there, we hope.
Definitely.
And you can reach out to Steve. There's his book again. You can get that
You
on
got to
Amazon.
get the book. I've already read it. It's
I'm
fantastic.
reading it. I'm going to read that whole book. I know most of it
I
because...
stole Brad O'Shoney's
Yeah.
from Bumpus Mills.
Yes. Yeah, we love Bumpus Mills. out
Brad,
there.
she's got your book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have
Brad,
to-
you'll have
he's
to call
gotta
me
come
if you
on.
want it
He's gotta
back.
Come on, we got to get him out here. So thank you so much for being here. This
Yes,
has been
thank
so
you.
interesting.
Thank you very much
And
for
it just
inviting me.
opens
Yes.
up so much to talk about, so much more. It's a shame we only have an hour.
I know.
And I'm getting even with you. I did not want that bra. She did.
No, she did not. I touched it and she wanted me to go alcohol my hands down. No
Well,
woman
anyway,
would want
we
that
do have a
bra.
good time here on this show. You never know what we're going to talk about.
If you can't have a good time, life's not worth living.
That
No.
is so true.
That is the truth.
Well, thank you all so very much for joining us tonight. We are glad you did, and I hope that you found some very interesting fodder to speak about with your friends here, with Steve's book and all, and buy that book. And we will see you next week. We've got a great show planned, so stay tuned, and we will see you again. Yes.
Goodbye.